Hello, my loves. Today we're going to look at some more Reddit stories, and if you've enjoyed a Reddit story, why don't you consider hitting the subscribe button? Maybe that's the notification bell too, and let's start with today's story. The story of first love. Just read a touching story about a person's first love and decided to tell mine. I left a comment in that thread, but we'll expand it here. We were both 17 and in California. She dumped me after a year or so for a guy she worked with. I went on to college, but every now and then, she would find me through mutual friends when she got dumped. She always did the same things, called me all the time or wanted to hang out and, of course, wondered what it would be like if we got back together. I had no intentions of getting back together and would only hang out when I had nothing better to do, and only as a friend, preferably with other friends. She would always try to make it seem as if we were a couple, though. One night after an outing with friends, she didn't want to go home, as it was kind of far from where we were, and asked to stay at my place. This was an apartment I shared with another student, a great guy, but we had our own rooms and a living room with a comfortable couch that many friends had crashed on. When we got there, she went right to my room and started undressing. I excused myself to the bathroom and closed the door. I didn't go back to the room, I just slept on the couch. I really didn't need the emotional roller coaster that she was, distracting me from studying. I took her home the next morning, and she acted like everything was normal. After that, I didn't hear from her again. But that's how it always was. Eventually, she would disappear because she would get back together with whoever. After college, I got a good internship in Florida. That led to a great career and repayment of my college loans, a starter house, and a decent car. At 30, I met a nice, never married, no kids woman, not that there is anything wrong with that, who I have been happily married to for 23 years. I'm 53 now with 2 adult sons who have solid careers. Then, about 2 months ago, out of the blue, she called me at work and wanted to reconnect. I'm not sure how she found my info. I know there are ways, but I have done my best to leave a small footprint on the internet. Probably it's because my boss insists on posting our names and positions on our website. Anyway, I told her I wasn't interested and I was sorry. She tried to play it off like I didn't know who she was. I assured her I did know. There was a long pause, then I asked her to please not call me anymore. I heard her sob and I hung up. Later, I got curious and asked a friend to look her up on Facebook. I don't have any social media other than where I can remain anonymous. To me, long-lost friends are long-lost for a reason. Anyway, it seems she recently divorced from the guy she dumped me for and lives about an hour or so away from me now. On her Facebook page, she had pics of herself and her adult son, and a few pics of her son's wedding with her ex on the other side of the room from her. I felt a little sorry that her life is a mess in her 50s, but these were her decisions that led her there. I'm not saying it would have been any better if we had gotten back together. I wouldn't change my life after 30 for anything. Yeah, I did a few things in my 20s I'm not proud of. Anyway, my wife would never accept reconnecting with my ex, and I would never do that to her. I did tell my wife about it, as I don't want any misunderstandings between us. Sometimes unsaid, seemingly trivial events can get taken out of context. My wife shows me her phone and asks if it was this person. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. The display of her phone shows my ex's name and number. My wife tells me the woman asked for me, but my wife told her it was the wrong number and hung up. My wife does not like me talking to women she doesn't know, and some she does. She thought the whole thing was funny in the end. Side note, I took that girl to my junior prom and still have the pic. My wife has seen it and could care less about it, but when she saw my senior prom pic, she attempted to rip it up. Sigh, because the girl in my senior prom pic was Asian, and my wife is also Asian. I just pretend to understand how that works. Story, it's a love story. The following is the story of how me, 29M, and my wife, 30F, met and married. Like many other people, my freshman year of college was a roller coaster of emotions. Between adapting to a new life and schedule, trying to make new friends, and the unexpected death of my father, things were changing fast for me, and I was struggling to be my normal, extroverted, happy self. I became involved with a ministry in college, and this helped me find like-minded people who I could not only laugh with, but also have the ability to openly talk about my struggles. My wife was also involved in this same ministry. Over time we would have discussions, but nothing too in-depth or serious. We were friendly to each other, but never anything more than that. Flash forward 2 years and we begin to hang out more and more because of a reason I'll touch on later, and we became really great friends. This would not last long, sadly, as my wife was about to travel the world for the next 2 years doing ministry work in third world countries. When I say doing ministry work, I do not mean she was hanging at resorts 6 days a week and visiting an orphanage for an hour or so. She was truly in the trenches, spending her years in remote villages where they don't have access to electricity or running water. While she was on this trip, she didn't have the ability to talk often, but whenever given the chance, I would talk to her about her stories, and this is where I began to truly fall in love with her. There was only one small problem. See, the reason we began to hang out more and more prior to her leaving was because she began dating a close friend of mine. While she was away on this mission trip, my friend became getting extremely close with another girl. They would hang out regularly one-on-one, openly cuddle each other around others, but according to my friend, nothing more than that. I spoke with my friend about this relationship and how he was emotionally cheating, but he never listened or paid any attention. I felt it wasn't my place to tell my wife about this, because I believed my feelings that I was developing for my Herb scared me from being unbiased. After years away, my wife finally returns home. Within a month of being home, my wife's friends told her about the relationship between my friend and this other girl. My wife was aware that they were friends, but she was not aware to the extent of how close they truly were. This led my wife to immediately breaking up with my friend. Now, you're probably thinking to yourselves, wow, this is great news for OP. You have to remember, the reason we became close was because she was dating a friend. Also, as my wife returned from her mission trip, I had freshly graduated college and moved 3 hours away, back to my hometown, to begin a career. I also believed in my mind that my wife was only friends with me because of the relationship she had with my friend. Nevertheless, occasionally I would travel to the college town and meet up with some college friends. When doing this, I would ask them how my wife was doing. They would always keep me updated, and eventually a mutual friend tells my wife that I have been asking how she was. This sparks our friendship as she begins texting me, but still, I lived 3 hours away, so I had no intention of beginning a relationship with her, but it was still nice to be friends again. My wife, being her caring self, began fostering a 2-month-old girl about a year after coming back from her mission trip. She did this while single and working a full-time job. Years pass and I am extremely displeased living in my hometown. See, my father was a small-town hero type of guy. Very well known and very loved. I worked hard to bring positive change in my community, but I felt every action I did I was always compared to my dad. People never meant to offend me by comparing me to my father, but I always felt like if I stayed there I was going to be living in his shadow. I wanted to forge my own legacy. One day I interview for a job in the town I went to college in. Somehow, I get hired. Over the summer I move back and immediately I am excited for a multitude of reasons. Soon after moving back, my wife and I begin spending a lot of time together. The 2-month-old girl is now 3 years old, and my wife and I do the silly thing and get married within 3 months of me moving. This became the greatest decision of my life. Since getting married, my wife and I have adopted the girl, made a few kids of our own, bought a house, and are truly living the fairy tale life. We've been married for several years and life couldn't be better. I tell this story because I want others to know you never know who the love of your life is. It could be a stranger, a friend, or a friend's girlfriend. This world is too short and crazy. If you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the read. This is my first time ever really making a Reddit post. Story: A Little Love Story. Freshman year of high school, this girl named Taylor asked if I wanted to date her. I said no, explaining that I had a girlfriend. She asked again, and I declined once more. 2 weeks later, I broke up with my girlfriend. My friend, Jerry, asked me who I could mess with next because I was feeling lonely. He mentioned Taylor, and I told him she had already tried to get at me, and I wasn't interested. He laughed and asked me to repeat what I said in a sarcastic voice. I did and didn't think much of it. 3 weeks later, I found out Jerry and Taylor were talking, and she claimed I had lied about her hitting on me. I didn't really care and let them be. They dated for 8 months, and Jerry was a close friend. A year and a half after they broke up, Taylor and I started talking as friends. Our conversations took a provocative turn and occasionally became sexual. It grew from that to meeting parents, doing relationship things, talking 24/7, and saying I love you, seeming to care a lot. Jerry had no idea, but I thought he wouldn't care. One day, about 4 months ago, Jerry, Fred, another close friend, and I took acid. Jerry, unprovoked, started talking about how good Taylor was in bed. He even showed me videos of them having sex. He still didn't know Taylor and I were talking. He bet me $100 that I couldn't have sex with her within a month. We were all high, and he called me a pussy, so I agreed. I told Taylor about the whole thing, and she hated me at first, but still came over because I was honest. Jerry found out about the situation 2 days after he made the bet. He eavesdropped on a conversation between me and Tyler, another close friend, on PlayStation. I was asking Tyler if I should tell Jerry or not because I didn't want to hurt his feelings or have Taylor come over at all. Tyler said I should just tell him, and I agreed. The next day, Jerry tried to coerce me into saying it because he didn't know that I knew he was aware. I told him, and he said I was wrong for keeping it a secret, even though I was looking out for his feelings. Taylor was reading his texts to me, and he was obviously hurt. I was trying to be considerate. Taylor still came over, but my mom busted in, and she had an anxiety attack. We didn't have sex. We cried together about everything. She left early due to the anxiety, but continued talking to me as if we were in a relationship afterward. She told me there was a low chance of us having an actual relationship, but constantly hinted that there was a chance. She did things like look at apartments, dogs, and baby names with me. She said I couldn't let Jerry and the others know she was still talking to me, so I kept it under wraps. They were still acting funny towards me, so I cut my close friends off for her. She was all I had. She cut me off 3 weeks ago, saying I didn't give her enough attention. Jerry used to cheat on her multiple times, and she would still go back to him. And she stopped talking to me because of attention? We were both in a bad place mentally, and she broke me down after building me up. She's so grimy and carefree about the situation, too. She won't tell me why she did it. Now I'm friendless and alone with nothing to look forward to. I told her many times she was what I looked forward to, and she said it was sweet and that she would never leave me. Then she blamed me for her leaving and claimed she did nothing wrong. All females disgust me. She took a year and a half to convince me she was different, and she broke my trust completely. If you have a girlfriend now, cheat on her and break her heart. For the boys. All girls are the same inside, no matter how much they portray being different. They will abandon you without a second thought. Heartless creatures. Story: My wife and I, our love story. My wife and I met in high school. We started as acquaintances in some of the same classes. I never really thought much of her other than she was in my class and she was cute. Somehow, I, and a bunch of other people became a friend group at a lunch table. Soon, this friend group would all hang out on the weekends. One of the other guys from the group asked her out. I wasn't disappointed or anything. I really didn't give it a whole lot of thought other than, good for them. The only dates or dating I did were with girls who asked me out. I did date a girl from the end of senior year until I left the area, military. We did the long distance thing the whole time I was in. When I was home, I hung out with my girlfriend and my high school friend group, which included her and her boyfriend. He was one of my best friends since elementary. I found out later that nobody in my friend group liked my girlfriend. My wife confessed, after we were married, that she always thought I was too good for her. In my last year in the military, I was home on leave. I was hanging out with her and her boyfriend, and I asked him why they weren't engaged or married yet. They had been dating almost 6 years by then. They were both evasive. I didn't know they were having trouble and were on again, off again. I joked that if he didn't marry her in a year, I would. Thinking about it, that was probably the last straw. If that wasn't, the next part probably was. So, being the buddies that we were, I asked her to go Christmas shopping with me. I was shopping for my girlfriend and had no idea. Once again, I found out later that she fought the urge to grab my hand that whole day. So my leave came to an end, and I had to go back to my duty station. Before I left, I stopped by her house. We chatted. When I was ready to leave, I said goodbye, and we kissed. I turned, walked to my car, got in, put the keys in the ignition, then the world stopped. What the fuck just happened? A couple of months later, she came to visit me. I lived in a touristy area, and she wanted to see it. Allegedly. Later, I found out she wanted to know if that kiss was a fluke or what. So she flew in. I picked her up, and we hung out that day like the buddies that we were. That night, we went back to her hotel. We talked and laughed and had a good time, as buddies do. It got late. I was going to excuse myself. She said, or you could stay here. I was confused. There was only one bed and no couch. If I was going to have to sleep on the floor, I'd rather go home. She had gone into the bathroom and came out in a little nightie. Nothing super sexy, but not a whole lot there. Lying next to an almost naked woman in my underwear, it still took me longer than it should to make a move. When I did, it was freaking me out. I was kissing my best buddy. I was looking straight at her breasts. Again, what the fuck is happening? We were attached at the lips and other places the rest of the weekend. A really long story made a little shorter, we made the year deadline. Within 6 months, we were engaged and married 5 months later. That was 2 kids in 30 years ago. We're still buddies. Sometimes I look across the living room, she's sitting in her chair, and I think, what the fuck just happened? Story: Love finds a way. My 35F relationship with my husband, 28M, shouldn't work, but it does. We've been together for 5 years, married for 2. We met at a pub. My ex and I divorced, and we'd been split for just about a year at that point. I had been with my ex for 3 years, we'd dated for 2 years, and were married for 1 year. Shortly after we got married, he started acting really controlling. I was in love, so I didn't see it at first. He was always gaslighting me, criticizing me, he was always micromanaging me. The biggest thing was he always looked through my phone. When we split, my ex kept trying to contact me. I blocked his number and his Instagram, but he kept making fake accounts and messaging me. When he figured out I wasn't going to respond, he stopped for a bit. He started occasionally sending nasty messages. Anyway, I was sitting at the bar, and my husband was sitting a couple seats away from me. I had a rough couple days, and my ex messaged me. It was so hurtful, and that coupled with how the last couple of days had gone, I started crying. My husband noticed and asked if I was all right. We started talking, and he let me vent. We traded numbers, and we met up a bit over the next couple months. We dated. It was essentially just us meeting for dinner once every couple weeks. We met at my place once, and I told him about how I was finding it hard to trust people. Then he opened up about his parents. I don't want to air his issues out on here. All I can say is they were really abusive. Him telling me that gave me a new perspective about him. My parents were abusive too, not as bad as his, but still. It's something we connected about. We still continued to meet up, and every time I felt closer to him until I eventually asked him out on an actual date. We dated for 3 years until he proposed. He's an awesome partner. He's the complete opposite of my ex. Our relationship isn't perfect, none are, but he listens to me and we talk things out when we disagree. He said he doesn't want kids because he doesn't want to be like his parents, and I feel the same. I feel like our relationship shouldn't work because of our age gap, but we're still going strong 5 years later. Story: a tale of love, a triumph, and a tragedy. A man once existed, went by the name T, but no one recognized him nor knew his name. He traveled vast lands in an attempt to find that special someone. Nobody knew what this person might hold or might give him, but they knew they meant something to him, something that couldn't be given by any other ordinary person. He traveled miles upon miles, searching from the bottom of the Great Lakes to the highest peaks of the highest mountains, never seeming to find this special person. One day, he stumbled upon a small village located not too far from a great city said to have held the richest and most valuable items. He hadn't expected to find this someone in such a place made from stone and old empty buildings once used to serve almost everyone's needs. The town lay almost empty upon his arrival, with the occasional village person happening to stumble by from what stores still remained. There he found someone so true and very beautiful, a woman who held many secrets but shared no care in informing the occasional person when asked. She had a smile that seemingly lit up the valley the village was nestled in. She had locked eyes that attracted many but could only be unlocked by one. When the empty keyhole that was her eyes was unlocked by one man in particular, this man being T, they stared at each other as if they had known each other their entire lives. They shared a smile and began an interaction. They laughed, their laughter sending waves of joy around the valley, creating a spark of love. These two eventually began a partnership that would last a millennia. They talked about great things and their dreams, their weaknesses, and their sorrows. They talked and talked and talked until they both ran out of things to laugh about. It was only then that they saw each other for who they truly were, a broken man searching for love and a beautiful woman who had never felt true love. This created a bond unlike any other, a bond strong enough to hold continents together. They spent days together, then weeks, then months, and eventually years, all the while under the influence of love. They danced in never-ending fields of beautiful flowers. They hugged and kissed in the rain. They stayed inside and laughed while it was cold out. They stayed outside to enjoy the cool breeze and fresh air when the temperature allowed it. It was perfect. Neither could deny it, and neither could the townsfolk. They all knew the couple and what they had been through. Their echoes of love always cried out from the place the two called home, their laughter, their cries, their smiles, their frowns, their ups and downs. It was like a dream, but eventually one does have to wake up from a dream. They both began seeing each other in a different light, arguing from when the sun rose till the sun set on the horizon. Some days they'd even hide from each other to avoid a conflict. It cut them both deep, a hole in their hearts, a hole that was as deep as the great ships at the bottom of the ocean. They ran away from each other, vowing to never see each other again, only to return once more to apologize and rekindle their love. This cycle continued day in and day out until T voiced his concerns to his beloved. She was worried at his sudden willingness to show emotion, for this was unusual for him. He explained that the two had been at each other's throats almost every day, non-stop bickering and fighting. He promised her that in the areas he lacked, he'd be better and give his all to ensure it, only if she did the same, for it was clear that the two had their own problems. She vowed to do the same. Her love for him couldn't be held back any longer. Though they fought, they had loved one another for quite some time, and there were reasons for this love. Over the course of a few years, they not only rekindled their love but grew together, knowing that arguments were not just going to disappear at the drop of a hat. They had learned to live with this factor, proving that their relationship was real and never a dream. They continued this love for a long, long time until one day, an unusual announcement came from the man. It turned out that he had been diagnosed with a disease that couldn't be treated. The doctor offered medicine in an attempt to prolong the inevitable. The man was reluctant, but seeing the fear in his other half's eyes, he knew what he must do, so he agreed. Over the next few months, his condition slowly deteriorated, worsening with every cough. She knew he hadn't much longer to live, and so she began preparations at his command. He knew what it meant to him, and what it meant to her. He watched as she prepared for when he was gone, though she couldn't come to terms with it. It was like this for quite some time. The man got worse, and the woman broke more. Even in this time, they still grew together, grew to appreciate every moment, grew to appreciate each other's smiles, and grew to appreciate each other's time. It was then, and only then, when the man felt sick unlike anything seen by that point. The woman rushed her husband to the doctor, and to their dismay, the clock was up, and the man was given a day. They wept in each other's arms, for both of them knew what this meant. The man had to go. It was here that the woman thanked her husband for finding her, but her husband told her these few words: "No, my love, it was you who found me, it was you who saved me, and it will be you who will be here with me in my final moments. Our time together shall always take away from the time we're apart. As long as you have me in your mind and your heart, I shall be with you. No amount of dirt, air, or time will keep me away from you, for you are the only girl meant for me." The woman wept harder than she ever did and hugged him, knowing this was going to be the end of their time together. They fell asleep that night, and only one woke up. The woman was distraught with her loss, but still kept moving forward, for that's what her other half wanted. She watched as he was lowered into the ground, this being the last time they would ever see one another. Dirt began to fill up the hole, much like their love had filled the holes in their hearts. She fought through the tears and walked to the tombstone with the words, I'm honored that you searched for me through thick and thin and stayed by my side through thick and thin despite everything, my love. I love you to the end of this world and back. We shall meet again, for our love is true and strong. Goodbye, my dear. As she stood up, the only thing left was a tombstone drenched in tears with the words, "No amount of time, dirt, or air shall keep me away, for this world holds one thing I cherish the most, my beautiful girl." The woman stepped foot in their empty house. The ear-piercing silence surrounded her. She sat down at the dining table where they had always laughed and messed around with each other as she stared out the window towards the mountains. There, a beautiful sunset was going down, a sunset that had given the same energy and delight as he once did. It might have just been another sunset for everyone, but for her, it was everything. Story: How a 4-year relationship ended in a night. My 28-year-old fiancé, 28-year-old, of 4.5 years recently called of our engagement after an argument about her college diploma. For context, we have been dating 4.5 years, and of that time we have been engaged 6 months. I proposed last January. From the day we met, she has been in school and originally was living with her family while she did just that. No job, no other responsibilities. Just school. That being said, as we progressed over time and she slowly began to spend less time at her family's house and more time with me, I became more responsible for our living expenses as she had no income other than financial aid a few times a year. Since I am active duty military, my housing is covered for the most part depending on location and rank, and I lived in a 1-bed 1-bath that was easy to incorporate her into when she'd come and visit for the weekend or so. About a year later, I bought my first house and had roommates, which made finances much easier. Additionally, she eventually got a part-time job which helped her cover her own expenses better and even offer some help with bills. However, for the most part one was still majorly responsible for our expenses as these part-time jobs never seemed to last, but I was okay with it because I loved her and believed I was helping her achieve her goal of a degree. Several years later, a few months ago we were having a discussion about moving on to base housing. I sold my house prior to moving for my next tour and have since been living in apartments again. For anyone who is unfamiliar with military terms, base housing is just as it sounds, a house in a neighborhood built within the perimeter of the base. Since our time together we got a dog, and often wished he could have a yard again for him. Additionally, we had some real close friends who also lived on base, and it would make our very frequent weekend BBQs much more enjoyable if we were able to just walk home rather than drive 30 minutes, not to mention more space, a guest room for friends and family to visit, just overall a better situation. There was a catch, however. In order to be eligible for base housing, we would need to be legally married. Something that is fairly common in military relationships, a courthouse-style wedding, although not always for the best reasons. Since we had already been engaged half a year, and I was due to deploy later on this year, holding off any real wedding planning, alongside her graduation coming in the fall, we had discussed the benefits of having a quick courthouse elopement prior to my deployment so I could share my service benefits with her, healthcare, family services, etc., and a huge plus was the pay raise, about $1,000 extra a month, that we had talked about saving and using for our actual wedding whenever we decided what we wanted to do. This wasn't the only time I had brought up progressing this way, as the benefits IMO greatly outweighed any risks. We had plenty of dialogue in the past as well that led me to believe she felt the same way, and in fact wanted to be official just as much as I did, aside from all the things discussed above. I brought it up casually as I usually would. A coworker had just told me about some openings in some of the nicer houses on base. I told her about them and she was very interested. I then went on to remind her that in order for us to apply, we would first need to be legally married. For the most part, one was the only one who ever brought this up, and it never really bothered me because up to this point I had no reason to believe she wanted anything different. Instead of seeming excited and willing to move forward, she began to complain about things like our marriage certificate being from a state she doesn't like, saying she'd now rather wait until we could go somewhere exotic and out of the country. This isn't something I was completely against, but it would defeat the purpose of all the reasons and benefits we had been discussing previously. I tried to reason with her, but I'll have to admit I was hurt. I was 100% willing to make this official and marry my best friend, benefits aside. I had partially hoped she'd match my energy there. Frustrated and confused, I began to seek answers. I wanted to know why I was openly 100% committed, and it felt like I wasn't getting the same in return. I began to ask for reasons or explanations on why I was feeling this way, and if there was something I was missing that may be holding her back. I remember specifically asking about school, because it was made clear in the very beginning of our relationship that school was above all the most important thing to her. To be clear, I also supported this. So much to the point where if she needed books and couldn't afford them, I ordered them for her. Her school was 100% online, so I was paying monthly for absolute screaming internet for her. I would work full days and come home and prepare dinner, grocery shop, clean, etc. You guys get it. I was her #1 fan, and supported her and loved her though all the failed exams, birthdays and events missed because she's in a group meeting, and constantly promoted positivity and clarity regarding any uncertainty about her degree plan and future. I was there and did everything I could. I am confident in that even as I type this now. When we got to this topic, I'll cut right to it. I asked her if she was hesitant because of anything to do with school or her upcoming graduation. This is where she told me that she hadn't really thought much of it, but now that she does, she doesn't want to get married prior to her graduation because she doesn't want my last name to be the one on her diploma. She told me that if it was that way, she felt as if it would take away from her and her accomplishments alone. She has been doubted before by other family, and if it didn't say her name it wouldn't feel as good to prove those doubters wrong. Something like that. This hit home, probably harder due to what felt like, rejection earlier on the legal marriage. All I was trying to do was ensure one. She was taken care of while I'm away from home and can't help, and 2. Progress our relationship to what seemed like our next organic step and what had been mutually desired and agreed upon. This causes a huge argument, as she begins to label me as controlling for not seeing why it had to be her way, and we spent the entire night making attempts to show where we had been hurt by the other. Eventually we had made up, found common ground, enough to shower together and spend some close time in bed. Sadly, it wasn't enough. The next day she came home in tears, informed me that everything from last night wasn't sitting well with her, and that she was moving back home and calling off our engagement. I was handed back the ring and began to try to ask questions. What changed? I thought last night we were okay, etc. She told me she had nothing else to say to me, but through the tears and packing managed to look me in the eyes and say these last words: even if I realize I'm making the biggest mistake of my life, it is something I am going to live with because there's no coming back. She left me and our dog that night after taking everything she cared enough about and packing it into her car. It's been a few months since this all went down. All of this time has been no contact. I think it also needs to be said that I never expected her to have my last name on her diploma. It was something I never even thought about until the heat of the argument. I think what really got me, what really cut deep, was hearing her say her and her accomplishments alone, while looking me dead in my face like I haven't done shit to help her get there. Again, all Eve ever known her as was a student. I accepted the financial burden that was trying to build a life with someone in that stage of life. It was never about me expecting that, but I guess also I had believed that if the roles were reversed, if I were that student being taken care of single-handedly by this person I loved more than anything, said yes to marrying, knowing the sacrifices and difficulty of taking care of someone who can hardly maintain a part-time job, maybe I wouldn't try to act like I did this on my own. I was very yes-oriented. I made almost every important decision thinking of how it could help us or benefit us. I think I set myself up for failure assuming I would have that same level of commitment in return. I also know I took it much harder given circumstances, but never would have guessed it would tear apart a 4-year relationship for wanting to feel appreciated and recognized for IMO going above and beyond anyone else in her life to help her achieve her goal. Story: my girlfriend took a break from me and spent the summer with another guy, so she could be sure I was the one. My Sam 23-year-old girlfriend, Zoe 23-year-old, left me to be with another guy 2 years ago. She did this because she needed to be sure I was the one. I was absolutely devastated. This was a premeditated decision. In the spring of that year, we were both in college and had been together 6 years at that point. I was unaware, but she had been conversing with a guy in class. Feelings grew. She swore she never cheated or did anything physical or even met him outside of class, but they did have a lot of text conversations for the months leading up to her revelation. Just as the semester ended, she sat me down and told me she was going to go stay with him for the summer. He had just finished school and was moving to a new city and had an apartment lined up. She was going to stay with him for June and July, then return for our senior year. She offered me her phone and said I could read everything that was there. She wanted me to know she had not cheated. I was a mess. I love her immensely and did then as well. I was begging her to not do this. She tried to be as comforting and consoling as possible, but at the same time was steadfast she was going to do this. Her main reasoning being we had only ever been with each other, and she needed to know she wasn't missing out. I couldn't even begin to guess how many times she said she loved me still saw a potential future, and this was just to be sure. She even encouraged me to date. She left 5 days after this conversation. I tried so hard to get her to stay, but she went. I worked and did nothing else those entire 2 months. I didn't socialize, I barely ate, I barely slept. I went from 185 pounds to 165 pounds. She asked me to not contact her. I respected that. I was living in her apartment, everything was a reminder, a trigger. It was the worst, most painful time of my life. I knew she would return, even if not for me. We still had a year to go in college. And she did return. 1 week sooner than expected. It was a Sunday and she just showed up at the apartment. She broke down in tears upon seeing me. I was so much thinner, eyes sunken, mildly unkempt. The apartment wasn't disgusting, but it wasn't nice either. She told me she knew just from looking at me that she had destroyed me. We both cried for a long time. She was so apologetic. She said she knows now, she wants me and only me. I was more than willing to take her back. We had a tense honeymoon phase upon her return, where we were both tiptoeing around each other, spending lots of time together, but also having this elephant in the room. That lasted a month or so when I started having the anxiety attacks. This is when we finally started to address some of the issues, which we had largely avoided. It couldn't have been timed worse as we started back to classes about this time as well. Over the next 9 months or so I became more and more depressed. I was verbally abusive at times. Zoe took it, everything I said. She always tried to reassure me, always took responsibility. I asked all the time what I had lacked. What could I do better? Why wasn't I good enough? What more did she need? She always said I was great the way I was. That she made the choice she did, not because any fault of my own, but out of her own immaturity. We discussed what her life those 7 weeks was like. Obviously it was a full sexual relationship. They went on dates, they slept in the same bed, showered together, that was our thing, at least to me it was, talked about where this was going. I didn't think the wondering, the mind movies, would be easier to deal with than the truth, but I have a lot of days where I wish it was still just my imagination. The hardest part to cope with is she told me she returned early for me, but at the same time, after his initial 6 weeks he was offered the same position at another branch. That branch was about 5 hours away. Initially he was only about 40 minutes away from our campus. They talked and decided that while this had been fun, he wasn't sure it was worth continuing long distance. She told me she had mixed feelings, which was to her an indicator to return to me and try and redeem herself. I on the other hand now endlessly wonder if she would have come back at all if not for him moving. That brings us to a year ago. I was still easily triggered. I still had my moments of name-calling and verbal outbursts. She always went into support and reassurance mode. But not this time. She teared up and said, "I deserve it, but I can't keep doing this." I realized then I was going to lose her again. I don't want to lose her, it was so hard the first time. I love her so much. At that point I rug swept everything. I stopped bringing it up. I stopped talking about my feelings about this, except in the most vague ways. If she brought it up or checked in on me, I played it off, told her I was doing good and was in a different place now. We got engaged 6 months later. We just got married 2 weeks ago. Zoe has been everything a man could hope for this last year. I have regained my trust in her, and she goes out of her way to love and support me. I am a rising star at the office. I've been really pushing hard at work. I take on all the toughest jobs, and I have been hitting it out the park. I just got promoted, and with it a substantial raise. On top of that, I have made it a point to exercise regularly and eat well every day. I am in better shape than I ever thought I would be. With all it said, I make it point to spend as much time together with my now wife. Even if she just wants to chill and watch TV, I'll massage her shoulders or feet, play with her hair, soft touch her arms or back. The little things she likes. The response has been huge. She can't keep her hands off me. We are doing small trips together, and our non-physical intimacy is consistent and deep. But it's all born of insecurity. This is my problem. I am so driven at work, and the gym, and in the kitchen, and with my wife, because I am so terrified she will leave me again. I sometimes look up the guy on social media. Just to make sure my career is going better, it is, that I am in better shape, I am. I don't want her to feel bad. I still feel so guilty of how I acted that first year we were back together, but it's hard pushing like this all the time. I'm just so afraid if I slip even a little, I'll lose her. I just got to stay focused, and enjoy the little moments of rest that come. If I do that, I think I can make sure no one beats me again. Zoe and I just celebrated our 1-year wedding anniversary last month. Our relationship is going very well. We bought a house. She's always asking me how she ended up with such an amazing husband. I have been busting ass extra hard lately. I hit a big bonus at work, and her job is doing well, although she has a lot more work stress now. I've been doing my best to help take the home stress off. Generally, getting up a bit early to make sure the house is back in order before we head to work each day. I don't want her spending her time thinking about that. I still remember how she said the guy was a bit of neat freak. She said that like it was a negative, but actually her quote was, "He was kinda a neat freak," which was nice, but made me feel all this pressure. Meaning she really liked that the place was always clean while she was with him, but I bet he got bent out of shape if things were left out by her. At least that's what I think she meant when she said that. That's why I get up early and take care of the place. I fix any mess she made or any dishes left overnight while she sleeps, that way she doesn't feel like it's her fault, or like I'm bothered by the small messes she makes. It's working well. We went to Hawaii for a full anniversary vacation, which was a place we've always talked about wanting to go to. We did a lot of touristy things, but mostly I was able to catch up on sleep. I normally only get 4 to 6 hours a night. So the extra helped out when I took on this really big client at work. If I do well on this one, another promotion could be in order. I rarely check on what the guy is doing now. His career hasn't grown as fast as mine, I can tell, and he has a bit more of a belly now. I know I'm beating him, he can't compete with me anymore. Zoe brought up trying for a baby soon, which is exciting. We can afford it, and it seems like the right time. However, I have been having some thoughts. Maybe you can weigh in for me. She has gotten pretty close with an older coworker, Mrs. Weaver. Mrs. Weaver was telling her about some funny stories from the times she was pregnant. They had to do with her husband making silly mistakes, but she also told Zoe how he was super supportive throughout each time. Zoe said she thought this was a sweet story. I don't know exactly what she meant by sweet. It made me feel like her priorities are changing. It may not be enough to just be fitter and more successful than the others. I know there's at least one single dad at her office. To show her I can outdo him and any potential others, I started reading some books on how to best support your spouse through pregnancy, some do's and don'ts, a few other newborn books. I do this on my breaks at work, so that it doesn't interfere with the rest of my routines. Or I listen to podcasts while working out. I doubt most men are this proactive, and really doubt the guy would have been, and the coworker is a single dad, so there's got to be something wrong with him, right? I mean, that's a red flag in itself. Unlike me, I'm all green flags, all the time. Do you think I have anything to worry about? I had almost forgot about this. I got on Reddit today because it came up on a Google search. Clicked and my profile worked. I see it's been 3 years since the last time I posted. We are the proud parents of an 18-month-old, Steven. He is perfect. Now that Zoe doesn't breastfeed anymore, I'm able to get up solo and take care of Steven. I mean, I always got up when Zoe did all those times before to help out, but now Zoe is a lot fresher. She keeps telling me it's okay to sleep in, since she is a stay-at-home mom now. But I'm still using a lot of that time to clean up the house so she can stay focused on Steven during the day. I got another promotion, my salary and benefits are huge now. It does mean I have to some availability to handle problems outside of hours though. We will try and start taking trips again or go for baby number 2 soon. It took a little bit of time to conceive, but I made the necessary adjustments to help it happen. We had a major setback one night. I had only slept like 14 hours in 4 days, I was exhausted and stressed. Zoe made best effort, but I just couldn't perform. The next day I made some major adjustments. I started eating Brazil nuts for the selenium, choking down spinach, added some green tea for the caffeine, balanced out my lifting with cardio. This was hard to do, because one day we marathoned the 3 Jumanji movies, and she said The Rock was hot. Which was huge wake-up call, because this whole time I had been trying to have a more balanced physique, but now I know she prefers that big bulky look. So I've been trying pack on pounds of muscle, but then I needed to get my cardio up again to prevent another incident while we were trying. It's all worked out so far. With the baby now, I had to focus more. I created a schedule to make sure I was doing all the things I needed. So every day of the week has something in every category. I plan every meal for everyone each day, I've assigned a different room of the house each day, and I have 14 activities to do with my wife or my child and I pick one each day. I also program my workouts to fit around all this. I know last time I posted people kept warning me that it was impossible to keep up at the pace I was going and I'd eventually burn out. But I haven't, I'm still keeping up, even here 3 years later. And most of that time has been with either a pregnant wife or a newborn. I also haven't heard her even mention someone else since the Rock incident. So I must be doing something right. I don't know anyone I'm not better than at everything. With all that said though, I need to do better at hiding my distress sometimes. That I guess is my biggest problem. Zoe has been asking a lot about why I'm endlessly driven, why I won't let her help more. Stuff like that, I'm pretty good at diverting those questions and explaining them away. However, this week she actually asked me if I wanted to talk about her leaving that summer, and that she feels I rug swept the whole thing. I think this all stems from when she heard me crying one night. I thought she was asleep, but wasn't. I managed to cover it up, so no real harm. I can't let her know why I am like this, then she will go, I still remember it, I deserve it, but I can't keep doing this. That's what she said. If I falter now, I may as well kiss my marriage goodbye. I've failed. It's all fallen apart. This last year, she has been pushing me. Ever since she became a SOM, she became more aware of my habits. She wants me to see a therapist. She even offers couples counseling. I don't need a therapist, that implies there's something wrong with me. How can there be something wrong? I do it all, I've done it all forever. I tell her I'm fine, I don't know why she won't accept that. She keeps saying I don't sleep enough, I have workout addiction, I seem paranoid, I have no social life. I do those things to give us the life she wants, I stay fit for her. I'm not paranoid, I am just diligent of others. She has been going on about our lives and I point out how well I've handled everything all these years. Why does she think I can't now? I can keep going, I don't need a break. And yeah, I faltered today, but they'll never have to worry about that happening again. It was her, she brought up the past more and more. She thinks it stems from when she left, and maybe it does, but I don't want to go back there. That was so long ago, and I've done so well since then. She just won't let it go. She keeps apologizing and telling me she loves me and wants the best for me. I know all that. She says I can't keep this up, says she knows how I feel, says I need help. She doesn't know. No one knows. Then this morning happened. It was just once. She went grocery shopping, I stayed with Steven. I was focused, I was playing with him. Then we started watching Spidey and Friends, and just sitting on the couch. I didn't mean to fall asleep, he was right by me. Zoe came home, found him in the kitchen, he had gotten into 2 boxes of cereal, it was everywhere. I popped up, immediately began to help, apologized. She scooped him up, told me to stop and relax. But there was this huge mess. She said I was manic, that this was what she was talking about. That I need to rest, I need to talk to a therapist. I snapped. I screamed at her. I told her to drop it, to appreciate what she has, that I was fucking fine, and wasn't some loser who needed help, I was better than that, better than everyone. She just stood there and took it. Then she looked me right in the eye and said, "Do not scream and cuss at me, I know you are struggling, it's okay, go lay down. You need to rest." Then she grabbed Steven's go bag, took him and started for the door. I asked where she was going, she said, "Just rest please, I'm going to my mother's, I'm just taking a break." A break. I just stood there, quietly, watched her walk out. She needs a break. The last time there was a break it broke me. I have done so much and it wasn't enough. I still failed to protect my son and that's it, she's not coming back. I failed as husband and a father. I texted her brother. Asked if he would come, he said he will be here in an hour. That should be it then, for those of you who followed me all these years I guess you were right, no one's good enough, not even me. I've never posted on here before, but for those who followed my husband Sam over the years, I am Zoe. I linked his last post to this one. I'm only doing this because a lot of you showed him tremendous support, which I appreciate, and hope that anyone who finds themselves going through crisis like he was will get help. Those who followed him know that 6 months ago we had an incident where he fell asleep while watching our son Steven. I wasn't angry, and I didn't blame him. I knew he was having a hard time. I was afraid. I had been trying to get him to get help for a while at that point, and with the emotion on the moment he snapped and lashed out. He hadn't done so in many years. At that point I made a horrible mistake I regret more than all my other life regrets combined. I was frustrated, but thought a little space would help us both diffuse. I was calm, I told him I just needed a break. I meant just for a few hours, and we went to my mother's house. I never should have left him alone. About an hour and a half later I got a call from my brother. He was so distressed. He had gotten a text from Sam asking for some help in the basement and to just let himself in. That's where he found him. He had hung himself from the basement ceiling. I hate that I couldn't see it sooner, years went by before I really started to notice. It's just so hard when you're young. I was working too, we were trying to buy a house and have kids, travel. It was a whirlwind. When Steven came I started to stay home. That's when I finally noticed. There had been hints, I just didn't want to see it I guess. You just don't want to admit things to yourself. You want to think he did all this just because he wants to. You think you're reciprocating it. Reading his posts, I didn't even realize how much I missed. I know he was actively hiding his stress and habits. I know he rug-swept all his emotions that could be taken negatively. But there were hints, why couldn't I see them? I'm the catalyst of his descent. I know I didn't deserve him after what I did. I've felt that shame for 8 years now. I've done everything I could think of to repent for my choices. I won't justify them, I was wrong, and I hurt someone I love beyond measure. I'm sure some of you wonder how I could do that to him. I wonder that myself often. It's easy to throw out the usual excuses: I was young, I was immature. To tell you the actual truth, it really was just FOMO. Combined with having a few friends in my ear, which I now realize they were not friends, and a schoolgirl crush on a classmate was all it took for me to traumatize the most important person in my life. It sounds so dumb written out, but it's true. The NRE lasted about a month, then it was 3 weeks of making up reasons to see it through. By time I left, I knew I had made a huge mistake, and came crawling back. I still shudder thinking how much I compartmentalized. The sight of him when I showed up has always haunted me. It's guilt I deserve and will always hold on to. For all the remorse I feel over what I did when I was 21, it pales to the feelings I have not being able to help him before it was too late. I think I have read his posts almost every day in these last 6 months. I failed him so much, I'll hold on to this pain for the rest of my life. I'll have to watch our son grow up without his father. Nothing will ever fill this void. I don't know what I wanted to accomplish with this, though it's been surprisingly cathartic. Maybe this will help someone else, someone holding on to something they can't handle on their own. If that's you, seek help. It's not weakness, it's strength. No one is perfect. No one can do it all on their own. Bye, and see you again in the next videos and stories.